welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to try and go through something with you guys today just as a bit of a tutorial video. I'm sure you've read the title by now. My main application that I use for digital art at the moment is Procreate on my iPad. It is a Apple exclusive app, I believe, and I wanted to do a tutorial video on how I draw hair on my characters. This technique that I'm going to be showing you today can easily be translated into other digital drawing apps such as Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint, things like that. I just wanted to kind of go through my process of how I've taught myself how to draw hair. I know as artists, we all have different things that we struggle with when it comes to drawing. I know that drawing hair for me was always one of the harder ones that I found in terms of getting the shape right, and the lighting as well is also a big key thing. So I am not 100%. I still feel like I have a lot to learn when it comes to this. I don't consider myself or this technique to be perfect, but I am very happy with how my hair looks when it comes to drawing different characters. So going through today, I wanted to do two different techniques for two different art styles. The first one I wanted to do was more of a comic book style, which I've been drawing more recently for D&D characters, and it takes a lot less time to do, so it can be very colourful, it can be very dynamic, and it's a lot of fun to do. And the second one I wanted to go through and do was more of a realistic style. Now, it's not complete one-to-one realism. I would almost call it like a semi-realism. It's the technique that I used to draw my last D&D campaigns poster. I'll put a picture on screen now of what that looks like just to get an idea of the kind of style that I'm talking about. It is a lot more detailed and takes a lot more time, but I know that people struggle to draw in that style as well. Realism is hard, and that detail can be hard, but I'm going to show you and break it down into some easy steps to teach you and make it a lot easier. So in Procreate, I've just gone ahead and opened up a new canvas. I've just selected the screen size canvas space in the selection tab. This is standard for the Procreate app, and you can use it too if you want to follow along with the same settings. And I've also added in these two basic sketches of just a female bust to follow along with. I used a poser app to just get the anatomy and the proportions correct, just so that I can kind of show you following along based on just a rough character sketch how to add hair to just a basic character. You can use this technique on any style, whether it be anime, it could be like a little chibi style, or if you're trying to do more realism and you're struggling with sketching, use references. I have no issue using references. I use Magic Poser all the time on my iPad. Easy Pose is another one which is free, simple to use, because I also understand that getting these sorts of sketches done is also very hard. So don't feel like you have to know anatomy and be perfect and sketch someone one-to-one to be able to do this technique either. Just kind of basing this tutorial off, you've got your character design down, it's just you're struggling with the hair. So I'm going to start with the one on the left here as my first victim. Oh, that sounds horrible. I'm going to do the more cartoon comic book style first. So starting off in Procreate, I'm just going to go into my brushes here. And now I have this set into my favorites, but I believe it's under inking. If we just scroll down, I'm using the syrup brush, just selecting that with a flat red base color. I might actually change that to a purple, just to differentiate it from the sketch itself. And then I'm going to make sure that I've got a new layer selected so that I'm not drawing directly over my sketch. And I use this technique to block out my hair. So one of the hardest things that I found in terms of drawing hair when it came to characters is the process of actually getting the shape right and the style. So I kind of came up with this technique in my own time, and I found it really helped to kind of block out the hair where it's going to sit on them to make sure that it looks correct in terms of the proportions of the body and the head, and making sure that it's not too ridiculous. Obviously, with art styles more like anime and cartoons, hair can sometimes break the laws of physics. Go at your own pace. Don't feel like you have to stick inside my box that I like to do. But I find that this process really helps me in terms of figuring out how I want my character's hair to look. So you'll notice here on her face, I've got her center line drawn. Now this is really important when it comes to how you want your character's hair to be parted. So I could draw a middle part and base it off that straight line, or if I wanted to go for a side part or have it slicked back, you still need that to get the symmetry right, because there's only a certain amount of hair on each side of our heads. Alright, so for this character, I think I want to go for a longer hairstyle. Maybe something similar to my hair. So for the first thing I'm going to do is I just want to block in on her head where I feel like her forehead ends and her hair starts. Now you'll notice this brush is very pixely. That's fine. We're simply just using it for the base of the sketch. Alright, so she's got a bit of a cap going on at the moment, but that's where I want to start. And then now once I've got the hairline figured out, I can go into a new layer on Procreate and make the bottom layer just slightly lighter. So that way I can see where her under sketch is, and also when I'm drawing over the top in a new layer, they're not just clashing and mixing together. So now where I go from here is just basing it off what I said before. If I want to go for a middle part just with her hair down, I would just then start sketching in the direction of where her hair would go, and I'm just going to block it in. So this is going to be a bit strange, but starting from her shoulders, I just want to kind of figure out how far her hair is actually going to sit outwards from her. And as we get closer to the head, it's going to sit closer to her skin. Just stopping at the ears. So this is the part where you want to get your dimension in. So our obviously faces are three-dimensional, they're not flat. So the ears I use is a really good kind of shift point from where the focus of the hair goes from front to back. So I've drawn this part of her face here, just here. It's obviously sitting more front of where her ears are. So we could either have her hair going behind her ear and tucking it back a bit, which would change the direction. And then, or on this side, we could do it so that the hair is actually coming out in front of her face, not tucked behind her ear. What I'm trying to do here is just get the thickness of the hair right. We don't want too much of that hair coming down in front of the face. So just drawing in strands. Think of them like noodles. Noodles. I meant like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the best way I can describe it. Like, think of it like thick chunks, so that we're not drawing each individual strand. So you'll notice what I'm doing here in the middle is leaving a little bit of a gap where her part is going to sit. just so that I know where that part is to try and get that direction of the hair, as I said earlier. And here on her face, I've just decided to leave a little bit of a gap between the hair falling in front of her face and then her ear. So in here, when you draw the skin, you'll see a little bit poking through, adding that a little bit of extra dimension, making it feel more 3D. Alright, so I'm just going to fill in this left side here, and I'm going to leave the right for now, and I'll show you why in a moment. Alright, so you'll notice here on the right side I've left the colour in here open and I haven't gone through, and that's because if I was to fill in this colour with the purple, I would lose where that hair that I've just drawn in front of her face would end. So what I'm going to do now is just open up a new layer, and selecting a slightly darker colour for the purple, I'm just going to go in and kind of block in around that hair. A darker colour, so that way you can see that the bit in the front's there, and then the darker you go, the further back that it is. And you can even do the same on the other side. And the good thing about this being on two different layers is you can go back and forth between the two, getting rid of what you don't want and what you do want without getting rid of the whole hair that you've put in completely together. So already here we can see that she's getting a little bit more shape and dimension, even just having two colours to block out where her hair is on her face. Now, something I like to do here, just to add an extra step and give it a bit more detail, is with the lighter purple that's at the front, we're going to add a new layer and go a lighter purple this time, and then add those streaks in really roughly. So what I've done here is I've just left a little gap in with the bottom, going in with a lighter colour. So you can do more of these if you want to add a bit more of like a messy look. However, I just want to do one or two of these. I might do one on the other side as well. When we're doing the inking process, it will break it up a bit more. So what I'm going to do here at the top of the hair is, because I said earlier I wanted this part of her hair here to be pushed behind her ear, I'm actually just going to draw in the hair going in a bit of a different direction here. Maybe even adding a little bit more to the front, because I feel like it would be drawn more over her head a little bit more because it's not draping in front. And you can kind of go back in and fix the shape a little bit if you need to, and then doing the same from the roots. So looking at the piece now, there's something I've noticed that I'm not too happy with, and it's just this little bump here I've noticed on the side of her head, so just going to go in and fix that quickly. And then something I like to do to kind of finish off just the rough sketch is I'm going to merge these layers together by pinching them. And then with that layer selected, I'm going to go up to the little magic wand here and select liquefy. Now what this does is it gives you the option to kind of push and pull the layer that you have around to kind of warp it to the shape that you want. So I'm just going to make my brush size a fair bit bigger. And as you'll see, I'm slowly moving the hair, kind of molding it like clay into a bit more of a desirable shape. Now keep in mind it will move things a fair bit, And already that looks so much better in terms of the direction where the hair is going. So now that I've got my sketch for this cartoon comic book style, what I'm going to do now is create a new layer, selecting the hair layer and with 2 fingers tapping on that layer to lower the opacity. And then in that new layer, I'm going to select my brush. So yeah, it's called the technical pen. And then selecting black, because with the more comic book style, it's going to have a black outline. And then selecting a smaller brush size, so I've got it at about 6% at the moment. I'm going to go over the top of my sketch, inking in the lines of where the hair is sitting. Starting on her face, and then I want to map out that ear first, because that's in front. And then you can kind of add in these lines behind her ear, following the purple to give that feeling that it's really tucked behind her ear. Over the top, starting from the middle point, following your sketch as a guide. Down the bottom here where I've left this gap, what I do with the inking brush is I'll just go over the first line and then I'll push it up a little bit. So whichever hair side you want in front is the one you need with the longer line. So I'll show you that again with the other side. So you'll see now this side that I'm drawing the circle in here feels like it's a little bit more further forward. Whereas if I do the other side, it kind of makes it feel like the other side. So I preferred this one. And then with the other line, I just kind of meet it here in a little V. And then with the strands that are in here, I usually just start from the bottom and work my way up. And then as the hair gets more further pushed towards the back, I usually add a little bit less detail. And then I'm just going to sketch in her face and her neck. Following her chin as well, just to make sure that it's following all the same lines. Now you'll see here with this lighter purple and the darker purple, I want those to be kind of separated from one another. So rather, I'm not going to draw like a straight, complete line through, but just from the ear, I'm going to pull down and stop about halfway through. And then I'm just going to add like a line in where that dark purple is, just to add a little bit of separation in the hair. And you can do a lot more of these if you want. But for me, I prefer a little bit less. And then with the part up the top, so you notice how we've left this line here in the middle. What I'm going to do is, using the inking brush, kind of put these like little bumps. And that simulates here, where you can see on my hair, the part beginning for her hair. And then following those light purple lines again, I'm just going to add the ink. In this process, it's important to note that line weight does matter. So in Procreate with your Apple Pencil, or if you're using your finger, the harder you press, the thicker your line will be. So try and keep that in mind when drawing the inking lines, especially for this style, is that it's not going to have that flow and the texture that you're after, because you've only got so much detail to represent what you're actually drawing when it comes to cartoon and comic book styles. Less is more, in my opinion. Having less lines and those finer lines to show that the hair is finer and that it's parting in certain ways to let little bits of light through can make a big difference when it comes to making your work pop. just on the back of the hair here, I'm going to follow one of the part lines that I drew earlier and just create a bit more of a thicker drawn line that goes down, trying to meet this line but leaving a gap, just to kind of simulate that the back of her hair is falling forward a little bit more. And then you can add a couple of lines in between just to show that it's bunched up. And then we're going to do the same on the other side. Using the same principles we used earlier, I'm going to show you how to do the hair in the front. So starting with that line meeting from the top of her part, we're just going to follow it down her face and then taper it off at the end. And then again, what I showed you before with the other side where the gap was, figuring out which side we want in front by drawing the longer line and then having the one behind meet in a V. Now when it comes to drawing hair, you always want it to be tapering down to a point. Having hair go from thin to thick doesn't make as much sense unless it's, again, that more animated style where hair breaks the laws of physics. And then what I've done here is just drawn the outside line coming up, but I'm not going to meet it at the top where the part is. And then drawing this line here just to kind of simulate where the face is ending from the hair crease, and then drawing in the silhouette of the ear. And then using the same principles we used on the other side of the hair, we're going to do the same on this side. And then yeah, I'll hide the purple layers just to give an idea of where her hair's sitting. So the important thing of what to do now is I'll just go through and ink over the top of her face and her body a little bit. If you want me to do another video on how to do that and go through inking her and her skin and that sort of thing, let me know down in the comments below. But just to save a bit of time, I'm going to focus just solely on the hair today. I've kind of realised as I've gone ahead and inked this that it's kind of turned into a weird self-portrait. So what I'm going to do now is just go through with you guys how I would colour the hair in, just to kind of finish it off, and then we can move on to the more realistic style. So the good thing with this sort of style is the colour is a lot more forgiving and it's so much quicker and a lot more satisfying in my opinion. But following the comment I made earlier of it kind of being a weird self-portrait, I'm going to go for the green that I used to have in my hair that is now completely faded out, to show you how I would map the colour out. So using the layer tab, I've made a layer underneath the inking layer, and then selecting the inking layer, tapping on it twice, you're going to click on reference. Now what this does is it allows the layers underneath of the inking layer to realise it as almost like a colouring page. I'm sure there's a more official explanation of what reference does, but it pretty much just allows you to drop colours in on a different layer but treating it like the ink is on that same layer. So what you'll need to do first is pick your primary colour that your hair is going to be first. So I'm going to go in and select this middle bright green. You don't want to go too extreme on the dark or light scale when it comes to the base color, unless it just depends, because you'll need to leave a little bit of wiggle room for your highlights and your dark tones. So dropping this color in onto the layer, most of it has gone in, but I'm just going to continue filling it in those couple of spaces that I've missed, just like that. In the layer tab again, I'm going to add a new layer above that one, tapping on it, creating a clipping mask. What a clipping mask does is the layer that you've got below the clipping mask layer, you will only be able to draw on that layer. So to show you an example, if I pick like the purple again I was using earlier, and then drawing on this layer, it's only going to go over the top of the layer I've clipped it to below. So you can use the reference of your sketch that you did earlier with the purple if you want to help you with the darker tones, but you can kind of go in and map it again with how you want them to sit, but you want to be a lot more refined with this process. Alright, so I'm just going to explain how I would shade the rest of the hair without it being a block. So in using the lines that we did for the inking process, you kind of want to follow them in how the hair is sitting. So using that line that I did over the top, the one behind it would be behind, so it would be darker. You can even stretch the shadow up a little bit just to give a bit more dimension. And then doing the same thing with these lines in here, just kind of putting in where you want it to go. And this doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of trying to follow a cohesive lighting. Now I realise as I'm inking this that I've probably gone a little bit too dark when it comes to the shadow colour. So using the magic wand again and then clicking on hue, saturation and brightness, you can kind of go in and adjust the layer that you're working on and change the color that it is. So I like that green a lot better, so now I can use that as my dark tones instead. I'm going to leave the shading there for now. I don't want to go in too heavily with the darker tones just to make it look too muddy. So now I'm going to move on to the highlights. So once again in the layer options, we're going to add a new layer and then make another clipping mask. So a clipping mask on top of a clipping mask will always follow the base that it's clipped onto. Making a new clipping mask to add in the highlights, and then going into my colors, I'm going to select the base color again, and then I'm going to go for slightly lighter. So then you just want to go in and map out where your highlights go. Your highlights are where you want your lighting to come from. So as you can see on this side, I've got more of the darker tones kind of casting the light from like this direction. So just finishing up the highlights there, mapping them in the same as the dark tones, but kind of going on the opposite end of where the dark tones would sit based on where your lighting's coming from. I've noticed in the piece that the darker tones towards the back of her hair around her neck aren't dark enough. So what I'm actually going to do is, selecting the dark tone layer again, I'm going to add one in between the highlights and the dark tones. That way I'm not drawing over any highlights when I go through this process. Is selecting the dark tone again and moving the color a little bit down in the darker again. Already adding that little bit of color has helped. You don't want to go too crazy with it. So just finishing out there with that second darker layer, it's already added so much dimension to the piece, and as you can see, the process of adding those different color layers has added so much more dimension to the character. I'll finish it up just off camera doing a basic ink of her and her skin just to kind of give her a little bit of finish. As I said, if you want to see that in another video, let me know. But yeah, here's her done. I hope that helps in terms of showing off how to draw her hair in this kind of style. I've really enjoyed drawing this more comic style, especially for D&D characters and that sort of thing. And it's just, I find it really satisfying. I find the process a lot quicker. But now moving on to a little bit more of a challenge and maybe a little bit more advanced is the more realistic style. Alright, so mapping in this one, I decided to go for a short hairstyle. It'll just save a bit of time in terms of explaining how to do this one, as this process is a lot longer and more complicated. I wanted to go for a blue just in terms of mapping it out. I don't know if I'll make her hair blue, but again, still same principles as I used earlier, is the 3 tones to mark out different layers of her hair from front to back in terms of light to dark, and also giving her a side part. So now the difference with this process is, rather than going in after here and inking, what I do is I have to decide what color I want to do. So what I do first is I'll merge the hair layers and make them a lot lighter. And then over the top, I think I'm going to give her like a pink hair. So I'll select just a pink color. And then I'm going to start from the front and work my way back. So just going in with her fringe, what I'm going to do is just trace this first sketch line that I've done in the front. And doing a straight line for her part rather than the bumps we used earlier. And then filling that in. And now this is where it gets a little bit more complex. So starting a new layer over the top, making that a clipping mask layer. I go into my brush settings. I've downloaded a couple of extra. You can get these online for free or pretty cheap if you're willing to spend the money. I believe Procreate does come with 3 standard hair brush pens that you can use. I've moved my pens around a fair bit since I originally got the app, so go through, have a look at the standard brushes. There will be some in there. So then what I do is I selected just a bit of a darker color for the pink, and then I'm using hair 3 brush, and then working from the bottom up, I'm actually going to go in and draw hair strokes. Make sure you're following the direction that the hair is going in to get the strokes, and leaving some lighter bits for where the highlights are going to go. So once I've done this, I'm actually going to kind of work my way back and forth between the darker color and the lighter color, breaking the hair up a little bit, and it makes it a lot more realistic rather than seeing the brush strokes. I believe this is a painting brush. It's called Soft Blend 1. This is one of my favorite brushes to use when it comes to drawing hair and when it comes to drawing realistic style portraits. So using that brush, it's something you have to build over time. I select that darker color again and go in even slightly darker, making the brush nib very small. I'm only on 1%, and then going in and drawing individual dark strands. Now, as you can see, the brush blends pretty well with those around it, the color, and you kind of just want to use it to build darker tones for where darker pieces of hair were sitting. If you feel like you've gone in too hard with the brush, go over it again, work back and forth the same way before with the lighter color. I tend to like to make my ends of the hair a lot darker as well, as it's a bit more bunched up, and try to follow your lighting. The underside of the hair will be a lot more darker. Now, another trick I like to use when drawing hair is going in with this smudge tool. I will find the same brush strokes, the same hair brush pen that I was using earlier, which was hair 3, and then I drag that over, and then again working back and forth between those brushes and the smudging tool, and it's just a slow build. That's why this can be more complicated and more of an advanced technique. It takes a long time to build and build and build to get the hair to where you want it to be, to make it look the most realistic. Alright, I'm at a happy point now where I've gotten at least the darker tones in. I recommend staying on the same layer, that way that the colors can blend together and the brushes can work with the colors that are already there. And I'm going to select the base color and going quite lighter, working over again with the same hairpin and adding in highlights. You want the highlights to be a little bit less smudgy than the darker tones. That's what gives the hair a lot more texture and a lot more dimension, giving it that realistic feel. You can smudge it a bit if you need to. Again, going in with that soft blend. And it can be hard if you make a mistake, but the brushes are pretty forgiving in this sort of technique, especially with this soft blend. I find it easy to kind of correct those mistakes if you need. Same principle as before as well with the part. I like to add a bit of darker tone to where the hair roots are. And you can slowly see over time, the more I build it up, the more dimension the hair is getting. So that's the first piece of the hair done. Obviously with a lot more hair, and if you want to add curls or straighter hair is a lot harder as well. You'll need a lot more chunks and a lot more segments to work on. But you pretty much just want to repeat this process, working from front to back. I'm going to go in now and do the other part of the fringe. This segment's a fair bit smaller. But the reason I like to work from front to back with the hair is it layers it in a way that builds the volume of the hair a lot easier for me. If you find this technique not right for you or you want to change it, whatever works for you, there's no rules. Smaller bits do take a lot less time because there's a lot less texture that you need to add. But with these pieces that meet in the middle, try and follow the same lighting and the same direction of the hair flow. So those are the first two pieces of the fringe done. I'm going to repeat the process for the rest of the hair. I don't want to feel like I'm jumping ahead too much, so I do apologize if it seems that way, but it's really just the same process repeated over and over again for this technique. It's blocking it out with that flat base color and then using the clipping mask technique to draw in the strands and then slowly working your way through the hair and mapping out where everything is going to go. And then you'll find the more that you put pieces in, it's kind of a jigsaw puzzle, it will come together. So I'm just going to pause here while I've done the top half of the hair. As you can see, you can kind of see where I've drawn the layers and how I've broken it up into different chunks. Just repeating the same process over and over again, following dark to light, adding those darker strands, mixing the colors back and forth. It's a build-up process. Now that I've done the top half, it's time to do the back of the hair, making sure the hair feels like it's got good depth. When doing the back parts of the hair behind the ear, same process as before, blocking it out, however, changing the colors slightly, perhaps even adding maybe a different tone. So for example, with this pink that I've done, I could go in with a bit of a purple or maybe even some blues. This doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to try and translate that the hair is down behind her ears and towards the back of her neck. If we continued on with the same colors that we were using, it would feel like that she's kind of got a wig on, or it's towards the front again, and it wouldn't make as much sense. It depends on the style that you're doing. It depends on what sort of hair. Different hairstyles would mean different lighting, different layers. You can see why this process can be a bit more advanced because it takes such a long time. But once we've done the back parts of the hair, I will show you the final step. Alright, so now that I've completed the final back parts of the hair, I'm going to move on to the last step. Something I will mention just before I continue about this technique is that managing your layers in Procreate can become quite tricky. So just something to keep in mind, because you're working in so many segments, and depending on the detail of the hair, you can get up to 100 plus different segments just for one person's hair. So just try to keep that in mind. Try and manage different segments. If you have, say, you want like a front part and the behind, you could try and do those in two different groups. Or if you have different colors in the hair, you can try and segment it based on color. But I'm just going to move on now to the final step that really brings this technique to life in terms of the hair. So as I mentioned before, you'll need to remember what groups that you've got to make this work in the better way. Because we're going to be merging layers together and adding a clipping mask. So I've got the 4 back pieces of hair here. I'm going to merge them together. This can be very scary. If you feel like you need to duplicate the layers and have a backup just in case anything goes wrong, please do so. I've had a couple of instances where I've been drawing hair and I've accidentally merged stuff and not realized until much later. Haven't been able to reverse it and didn't have any duplications, so I had to redraw the whole thing. So just something to keep in mind. Please try and manage your layers the best way you can. So for this final step, what I'm going to do is I've just selected the medium brush and selecting that clipping mask layer. I'm going to go in with a black and add in like a root color for her. I imagine this girl has dyed her hair pink and she's got black roots. So you don't necessarily have to do this stage. You can do it as just a form of shading, just to add a bit more dimension. I'm just doing it with the black to make it show a lot easier on the screen. But with that brush, I've set it to about 5%. And as you can see, very lightly in those back layers, adding that shadow has already drawn your eye to those areas so much more. And then again, can be quite scary, but I'm going to merge all these top layers. Don't forget, if you need to, add a duplicate clipping mask over the top, and then just in the roots here, making the brush maybe a bit smaller, very lightly blending in. And you can, as I said earlier, do it with shadow, so I might add a little bit of a dark spot in this curve. Maybe add a bit in here, erasing anything that doesn't need to be there. Make the brush smaller so it's a bit more controlled. And you don't need to use a lot of pressure with this brush at all. Just like that, her hair has so much more texture just from adding those tiny bits of shadow. I'll do a comparison if I just remove it and add it back in. It's just changing the form of her hair so much. So zooming back out now, guys, you can see that both the two different styles next to each other, they both have different things about them that make them pop and make them unique. I personally love the style on the left a lot more. The process is a lot more streamlined and can be a lot more simpler. But for those detailed pieces that can take hours, you can see that the process of the right one, which is a bit more realistic, is worth it in the end. When I was able to complete that poster that I showed you earlier, I'll put a picture on screen again here. The process of that and finishing that took me 100 hours to complete. So going in and doing all the skin and the hair, it took a long time, but the payoff of what I was able to achieve with that piece and how far forward it developed my art was insane for me. So I hope that this tutorial has helped. I hope that it, even if you guys take away just one thing from it, I hope that it's taught you guys something, and try it for yourself, you know, even if you don't have Procreate or an iPad. This technique could easily be translated to pretty much any other digital drawing program, I believe. I don't know too much if it would work as well with traditional drawing, as you don't have the layer option to use and clipping masks and things like that, but give it a go. Let me know how you go, and if you want to see more like this tutorials in the future, let me know down in the comments below. If you want to support me or the channel, there's also my Amazon wishlist linked down in the comments below. Please don't feel like you have to get me anything, but I appreciate you nonetheless. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.